What if Napoleon wasn't so obsessed with the idea of an empire? We all know Napoleon as a great military commander who changed the face of Europe. But what if his successes and failures weren't just the result of his strategic genius? What if his personal demons, ambition, narcissism, and the fear of losing control, played a key role in both his victories and defeats? Born into a family with little wealth, he aspired to power. And not just any power, absolute power. His ambition knew no bounds. He was willing to risk everything to achieve his goal. When Napoleon became Emperor of France in 1804, his coronation was not just a political event. He took the crown from the Pope and placed it on his own head. This gesture symbolized his independence from any spiritual authority. Napoleon wasn't just an emperor, he was his own god. Napoleon's narcissism was clear. He rarely took others' advice seriously and often made decisions without considering the input of more experienced generals, which led to strategic mistakes. For instance, his desire to wage war against Russia, despite the obvious risks, became a key factor in his downfall. He also struggled with constant striving for recognition and greatness, which led him to break alliances and start wars that could have altered the European balance. This obsession with validation led him to make and break agreements with certain monarchs, all in the name of maintaining his image as a great ruler. Napoleon constantly lived in fear of losing control. His army, his empire, his very greatness. Everything was at risk in his eyes. This fear pushed him into aggressive and often unsubstantiated actions. After the disastrous campaign in Russia in 1812, Napoleon found himself in a situation where his army was almost completely destroyed. Instead of accepting defeat, he chose to continue the war. This decision wasn't rational. It was driven by his deep fear of losing control. Napoleon constantly repeated that France must be great and independent, but his thirst for power and constant fear of losing it led him to aggressive foreign policies. He couldn't afford to lose a single battle because it meant the collapse of his rule. Napoleon felt his power was fragile and could crumble at any moment. This internal conflict led him to take increasingly risky decisions, which in turn jeopardized his reign. Each defeat was seen as a threat to the very existence of his empire. Napoleon was a brilliant strategist, but his mistakes were not always caused by external factors. Often they arose from his own misunderstanding of risks or his sense of invincibility. The Battle of Waterloo, the culmination of all Napoleon's errors. He underestimated the weather conditions, underestimated his enemies, and, most importantly, displayed a sense of invincibility. His internal superiority complex and lack of proper strategic analysis played a fatal role in his defeat. He was driven by the desire for a quick and decisive victory to prove his strength to himself and his people. Napoleon couldn't bear the thought that his empire could be under threat, so he took on the challenge at Waterloo, despite the unfavorable circumstances. Beyond ambition and strategy, Napoleon also suffered from depression and deep emotional crises, which influenced his decisions. After Napoleon was exiled to St. Helena, he experienced not just a political downfall, but a personal tragedy. He was shattered not only in the political sense, but also in a moral sense. His personal reflections on the fall of his empire are often revealed in his letters and diaries. Napoleon couldn't cope with the idea that something beyond his control could defeat him. This led to depressive moods, feelings of emptiness, and isolation, which only worsened his tendency to make impulsive decisions. The denial of personal joys, devotion to his dream, and eventual abandonment of his ideals led Napoleon to philosophical alienation. His obsession with absolute power paradoxically connected to his inner weaknesses. He desperately tried to hold on to what was impossible to keep. Napoleon remains one of the most contradictory figures in history. His ambition and narcissism led to the creation of a great empire, but they also became the reason for its collapse. What if Napoleon had been able to control his ambition and make more thoughtful decisions? What if Napoleon had learned to acknowledge his weaknesses and control his fears? Would he have become not just a great military commander, but a great ruler? Or perhaps his downfall was inevitable due to his very nature?